before starting any project, I strongly recommend that you do two things. One is that you inspect the area where you're going to be, in this case, a garbage disposal. So inspect that area under the sink where you're going to be installing. So if you have an existing one, always look at how is the existing garbage disposal connected. And if you're inspecting and you're not sure if you can remember, take a picture of how it looks already. That way, if you run into any problems, even though you've got assembly instructions for the new one, at least you can refer back. Now, in this particular case, I'm going to modify what I just said because I need to make an adjustment to the connections that are already here. Normally, when you have a garbage disposal, you may be able to use the existing connections, but I'm not going to be able to. But I'll come back to that in a moment. But again, one of the things you want to do is to make sure you know exactly how your previous garbage disposal was assembled before you start. And if need be, take a picture so that you can come back to it. So that being the case, when I say take a look at it, what I'm getting at is, here's the garbage disposal. Here's the holes that's leading into the garbage disposal from the dishwasher. And then here is what's leading into the drain, because this is a double sink. So the garbage disposal is on one side of the sink, and then and I'll say the drain is on the other side of the sink. So make sure that you see how it's hooked up. Now, what I mentioned, and then I'll come back in a little more detail in a few moments, is this particular garbage disposal I've replaced before, and I replaced it exactly as the previous one was assembled. I have now learned that it was not assembled correctly. So by just merely following the previous hookup assembly, I've created problems for myself, and now I'm going to correct it. And I'll go into a little more detail. It's very simple as far as removing it. First and foremost, you want to make sure at least you disconnect it. It should be plugged in. Now there are some garbage disposals that are not plugged in. They're what's referred to as hardwired, and hardwired means that the electrical line that comes from the garbage disposal is hooked directly to the power source, which means you've got to disconnect the circuit breaker or turn off the circuit breaker. In this particular case, and in most cases, it's simply plugged in. So again, this is step one. Now I want to talk about step two here. Okay, step two is to look at the new garbage disposal. And quite frankly, you can reverse this if you'd like. You can look at the new garbage disposal first and kind of see how it's made, how it is to be assembled, and then you can inspect the old one. So either way, as long as you don't start your work until you've completed steps 1 and 2, it doesn't matter which direction, which order you go into. So here's the new garbage disposal, and notice there's the two holes. The top one, if you remember the old garbage disposal, there's the holes, or the hole for the holes for the dishwasher, and then the bottom is the connection for the drain. And it also has, the new one also has a plug, which is coming out from the bottom. There's another piece here, this top half, that I want to draw to your attention. And then let's go back to the existing garbage disposal. And you'll notice again, there's the top holes for the dishwasher and the bottom. And then at the very top of the sink, notice it's an assembly very similar to the one with the new one. So now I'm going to go one step further, and before taking it off, I want to demonstrate how you should do that. Okay, what I want to do is to demonstrate how to remove the existing garbage disposal. Before we get started, I thought I would give you the demonstration first. So this is the new garbage disposal, but assume this is the existing one. It's already under the sink and it's being held together. It's hanging free by this whole assembly here. So it's very simple to remove this. If you'll notice, you'll see this metal loop here. You'll see one there, and there's also one behind that you can't see, but there are 3 of those. And the idea is that all you have to do is stick a screwdriver, and because this is mounted under the sink, it's solid, so it's forceful, and all you do when you pull it, this comes apart. Now, there is one other piece, but that removes the dishwasher. Now you can very easily move the dishwasher out of the way. The next step is, how do you get, if this were the existing connection, how do you get this from under there? And I want to use an old one in order to show you how it's done. So what you've got 3 screws, and you would keep in mind you're under the sink, and the reason I'm showing you this because it's going to be very difficult to show you what I'm doing when I'm under the sink. So I figured I'd show it to you this way first. So you'd release these 3 screws, because again, this piece is connected to the top of the sink and underneath the sink. So you've got to get this out from under there. Now, one would think that once you release these 3 screws, that the part this is at the top of the sink. You would think that would come out, but it doesn't. The reason why, there is a wire clip in here. See, can I get it very quickly? Here it is. And all it is a wire clip. There's a groove here, and that wire clip, and I think I can get it back on very easily. Actually, you need a screwdriver to get it back on. I was going to show you how easy it was to get it back on, because you're going to reverse that once you are putting it together. Okay, I got it clipped back on. And all you do, once you remove the 3 screws, the ring, the rest of this comes apart. This is on the top of the sink, and this is underneath the sink. And now you're ready to begin assembling the new garbage disposal. Okay, I've removed my old garbage disposal. We now have a hole, and I just want to show you what I did. If you recall, I gave you a demonstration, but just so you can get a better idea, I didn't tighten this up, but if you loosen, what I did is when I put the screwdriver, what it's doing is there's a clip next to each one of these notches. And once this screwdriver is in, when you turn it, it frees it so that this comes off. And then I did, if you recall, here's the wire ring. So I removed all of that, and once I removed the wire ring, I could remove, this was on the top like this. And you may be able to notice the grooves. That's where the wire ring was resting, inside that groove. more or less. I'm not going to put it on completely again, but basically the wire ring was resting there, and if you recall, the wire ring has, let me try to get it. The wire ring has an opening there that's cut. And then once you remove that wire ring, then you can remove this part and everything comes apart. The other thing I want to show you before I go any further, it depends on the model, but although this has a plug, I recall when I did this, because I also installed this old one, I had to remove this little panel from underneath in order to wire this. The plug came loose, and then you had to wire it. And some of you may be intimidated, but it really is pretty basic. There are 3 connections. The green wire goes to the green screw. The only thing that might be tricky for you, and you really can't get a close look, I wish you could, but I don't. What I wanted to show you that I can't really show you, I had to splice this cord in order to connect. The white one, what you can't tell when I spliced it, when they separate, one side has ribs on it. One side of the plug, the gray plug, has real narrow ribs on it. The other side of the gray is smooth. The smooth side goes on the black wire, and the one that has the ribs goes on the white wire, and then obviously the green goes on the green screw. That's the only complicated part about connecting this, because there's nothing to connect. I'm going to disconnect that. There's really nothing to connecting it other than putting 2 wires together and putting the nut on. I don't have that with my new one. It was already assembled, but you may encounter that it needs to be connected. And so that you might want to do a little more reading on if you're having trouble, or play this back again. But you just twist the wire together, put your nuts on, and make sure they're tight. What I always do is I pull on the nut and the wire. I pull one direction of the nut and the other direction of the wire, and if they don't pull out, if neither of the wires pull out, then I know I've got a tight connection. And then when I'm done, I put the cover back on, and there's only one screw to put it back on. So I wanted to draw that to your attention because you may encounter that. The other thing before we proceed, and so I don't forget, I'm going to reconfigure my hookup. I have a double sink, and I was always under the impression I needed. This part comes with the garbage disposal. But if someone only has a single sink, they use this part that comes with the garbage disposal. And I'm going to walk over in a minute and show it to you. And if you have a double sink, you do not use this part. Well, I thought you had to use it all the time, and I think it created problems. I'm going to walk over and get what comes in the packet, because I ended up having to cut it, because this is how it comes. And I had to cut it in order to use it, but I didn't even need it. And you'll see that once I'm done hooking up. But now you see the hookup for the dishwasher was here, and this part comes off. This screws off so that you have the hole. Now the other thing that we have to do is, I've got to knock a hole. Not everyone has a garbage disposal. And so they plug this up in case someone doesn't have one. So I need to knock a hole in the new one so that I can hook up my dishwasher. And I'll show you that in a few moments. Okay, our next step is to hook up the mechanism in the drain. And what I've done already, I'm going to pull this off, because this is the part that we need to work with now. This piece remains in place, but we're now going to work with that. I've already taken that ring. Remember, there's that wire ring that's underneath here. I've already taken it off. So In doing so, here are the pieces. And then there's the groove part where the wire ring was at. I had already removed that. So now we have these pieces. And we also have this. So this came out also. Because our next step is we're going to take this and place it inside the drain. But before we can do that, we've got to use some plumber's putty. And you need to make sure you get the right kind depending on your sink. This is a stainless steel sink. They also have it for, what's the word I want? For granite. So you want to make sure, again, when you get the plumber's putty, that you've got it for the right one. And then I'm going to apply that. Give me a second and I will show you. Okay, I've got the plumber's putty. And basically, plumber's putty reminds you of Play-Doh silly putty. It's not dry. And what you want to do is to get a very generous amount. And you're going to create, I'll call it a rope or snake or whatever, because you're going to put it around this part. I needed to go all the way around. It doesn't look like it's quite there yet. Okay. Well, it looks like I went from one extreme to the other. What's really interesting about packing this on is that most of this is going to ooze out. But that's how it works. So the idea is, before I put it on, you put this in the hole, then underneath the sink, there's this, it's really a paper washer. So underneath the sink, you put the paper washer. And I got it wrong because, let me think for a second here. This goes on first. This goes on. This goes on next. And in case you're confused, I'll clarify in one moment. So then this is going to go on, and then the wire ring is going to be last. So let's reverse this. This is what's going to drop in the hole on the top of the sink. Underneath the sink will be this paper washer. Then this piece, this piece, and then the wire. That will hold it in place. And while we're already here, before I do that, let's just take a quick look at what's going to happen. Once that is all in place under the sink, really what happens is, and hopefully I can get a close shot. Remember, we talked about the tabs. There's a tab here next to this loop, and there's a tab here, so on and so forth. So imagine now all of this is now assembled, the top part under the sink, so now it's secure. When you're ready to connect the garbage disposal, it's going, this piece right here is going to be lifted. And you're going to have to hold this garbage disposal and this piece because there's actually, it's a groove and it's at an angle. I don't know if you can see the angle. Notice the angle, because what's going to happen is, remember there's a notch next to each one of these. So you would be placing this under the sink next to each notch and turning. You'd use your screwdriver. You can turn it by hand to get it connected, and then you use your screwdriver to finish tightening it. again, underneath the sink, you'd use your screwdriver and you'd finish tightening it. But right now, I want to take it off. But that will give you some idea of what's to come here. Okay, so now it's assembled. Everything is under the sink in the proper order. And as I tighten the 3 screws that are under here, the plumber's putty oozed out from the top. So now I'm going to show you the top, and we've got to scrape off the excess. So here we are, and it's very soft. So it should be relatively easy. And then there's that. So now our next step is to attach the garbage disposal to the under the sink. But before we do, we've got to knock out. You'll see in here that there's a white piece in here, and we just need to use something that's solid. Let's say maybe something like this. And I should be able to tap it. I don't want to overdo it. It's a plastic piece. I think I'll use nope, that's too large. It's kind of hard to do when I'm holding the phone, but I'm going to try to do it. I turned it upside down. I think the side that I had was a little bit too large, and I flipped it over, and then that worked. And let's see if I can get it out while I'm holding my cell. I'm going to have to put the cell down for a second here, or here it is. This was the part that was in the hole. And now we've got a hollow hole here. So we're ready. So remember, what I'm going to do is use these notches. There's a notch here on each one of those. And if you remember from my diagram here, or this old one, those notches have to rest on this ledge here. And all you need to do, all I have to do is to get it in place. And once I get it in place, it will, I can then use a screwdriver in order to do it. Okay, let's see if I can do this here. I'm going to just one quick point. When I'm under the sink, my objective is, if you'll notice how that is, I'm going to try to, I shouldn't say try, I have to. The notch should go on the lower end. Notice that it goes on an incline. So the notch should be on the lowest part of the, I'm going to try to put my finger on it here, on this side. If you'll notice on the other side, it's a little higher. So I'm going to be working to try to get all 3 notches on the lower side. They're all identical on all 3 sides. They are identical. In the lower end, where my thumb is where I don't want to be on the high end. And then once I get it in, I can then use a screwdriver to tighten it so that it goes further up to the higher end. So that's what I'm about to do now. Okay, that's in. Notice my hands are not touching. So I'm going to now tighten this. And I'm just going to use a screwdriver. Okay, now that we've got that in, our next step is to connect the drain. So remember, this is a double sink. So this side is where the drain is, and then we were already on the side where the garbage disposal. So if you recall, I mentioned if there were not a double sink, if it were a single sink, you'd need this because this would go in this spot so that it would go down toward, it would be angled down toward the drain. In our particular case, we don't want it to go down toward the drain. We want it to go over toward the drain. So as a result of that, we're going to have to use a straight pipe. Now, even though I said that this came with the garbage disposal and it's not needed, what was also with this part were these pieces. This you don't need, but you do need the other pieces as well as the bolt. And the reason why is this slides on, and then this slides on top of that. This is what's going to connect this pipe to the garbage disposal. And this side, we're going to have another piece. So remember, we're trying to get over to the pipe. So it's really going to be a straight piece. My problem is, because I did use this the last time I replaced my garbage disposal, I angled down and then went over. So as a result of that, the drain pipe that's on this side is too low, because if I were to connect this right now, notice that the drain is down here. I need it up here. So I've already placed my mark because I'm going to have to cut some of this away in order. I'm going to have to remove this piece. I've got a longer piece that I can use, but I also have to cut a little bit of this top part off. So this connection has to be reconfigured, and that's what I'm about to do. So I'm going to put back so the idea is that this is going to fit into the other part. And let's see here. I do have some new parts here. These are interesting. These are washers, and you'll notice how they're shaped because they actually sit down. The narrower piece sits on top. That way when you screw it, it creates a tight barrier once it's in. So the way this would actually work, I'm going to take this off, and you'd put the cap on first, and then you would put this piece on. This goes here, and by that going there, it's going to seat. And this is a rubber part. It's either rubber or plastic. And then this tightens here. My advice is not to completely tighten until you've got all your pieces together. You're going to do the same thing here, because this piece is going to rest inside of here. And the same principle works. This is the old one, but it goes.
Now I still have to connect this drain to the garbage disposal. And once again, these parts come with what I'm doing right now. The metal part comes with the garbage disposal. And for some reason, I think I'm going to loosen. For some reason, I'm having trouble. Okay, got it that time. Okay, now they're using a screwdriver to tighten. And before I completely tighten, I want to connect my hose to the dishwasher to make sure it's connected before, so that I don't have to completely unloosen the drain pipe. So let's make sure I can get that back in place. I think that went well. That was one of the easiest pieces. I'm just hoping that's tight as it needs to be. I'm just tightening the screws right now. Okay, got everything, I think, tight, so now I want to finish tightening my pipes, my drain.
By the way, if you're doing this project like I am, I'm doing it on a Sunday evening. I don't advise you to start too late on Sunday in case you need to run out and get some more parts. You don't want everything to close up on you. So keep that in mind when you're planning your project as to whether you need other materials just in case. So you want to start to allow yourself time if you have to run out and pick up something. And they tell you only to hand tighten so as not to over tighten. So that's what I'm doing. Except for the screws, I want to make sure that those are in. do two things. One is to plug it up, but I'm going to run some water through the drains first. In fact, I'll run the water on this side, the drain side, to make sure there's no leaks here, and then I'll run some water into the garbage disposal. So I'm going to start with the drain. Okay, I'm going to start by filling up the side of the sink where the drain is. So I'm going to fill up this side first. And I say filling it up, but I'm not going to fill up the sink, maybe about half full, because I want to make sure that the drain is working properly. So as soon as I get enough water in, I'm going to empty it. Okay, that should be enough to get an idea. So what you want to do, you want to make sure you're inspecting to see if there are any leaks on the bottom, on the top. And so I'm going to let the water out, unstop it and let the water out. And you may be able to hear it running down. So now I'm just looking for leaks. And there's no sign. So now what I want to do, I'm going to put water in both sinks. I'm going to stop up both sides of the sink and fill it up so that the garbage disposal and the side with the drain, that'll be even more water pressure coming down. So I'm going to fill up both sides of the sink. Stop them up and fill up both sides. While that's filling up, the other thing that I always do is I don't just visually look. I'm a little more superstitious than that. So I also run my hand around the connections just to make sure I don't feel any moisture or water. Okay, that's the drain side. Now I'm going to fill up the side with the garbage disposal. And I keep using the word fill up. It's only about maybe a third of water in the sink. Okay, that should be enough. And what I want to do is I'm going to unstop both sides. Again, that'll give even more pressure because the water from the garbage disposal is coming out from this side and it's going to dump into here. So you got the water coming out of the sink side with the drain and the water joining that from the garbage disposal. So that should really give me a good indication whether I'm going to have any leaks. So I'm going to remove the stopper from both sinks. Okay, still good. And my other test is touching everything. I don't see any visual leaks or visible. So it looks like the connection's a success. The only thing remaining that I think it'll take me a little time, but I strongly urge you to do, is you also need to run your dishwasher, or at least figure out how to get water in your dishwasher so that it will drain out, because you also want to make sure that the connection with your dishwasher is not leaking also. But that's your final test, is making sure that you check. And I'm a bit superstitious, and maybe you're the same way. I still check several days, or periodically I come back and I check to make sure there are no leaks, even though there's none right now. Maybe using the garbage disposal, maybe there's some vibration, whatever the case may be. I always like to come back and double check to make sure that my connections are still intact. But there you have it, basically replacing an existing garbage disposal. And The other thing, the principles are the same, but if you have a single sink, your connections will be slightly different, but the principles are basically the same. Hopefully this will be helpful to you if you have to replace your garbage disposal.